have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human beings.
It's rotating. There's a whole fleet of them.
Hello and welcome to The Nexus. A new documentary called The Age of Disclosure is making a big splash in the United States and elsewhere. It features some very credible people, former CIA, former National Security Council, and even a retired admiral, suggesting we've already been visited by aliens. We'll be putting some of their claims to our panel of experts in just a moment. But first, here's a quick look at the documentary.
The American people are ready to receive the truth.
Humanity is not the only intelligence in the universe.
Humanity is not the only intelligent species.
We are absolutely not alone.
Non-human intelligence exists.
UAPs are real, they're here, and they're not human. I spent 25 years as a senior official with the CIA.
I've worked on highly classified UAP programs.
28 years as an astrophysicist.
I served as the 4th Director of National Intelligence.
Director of Aviation Security in the National Security Council.
The one-star admiral after 32 years of service.
People that come forward with this, I feel like they've taken their life in their own hands.
I was recruited to a highly sensitive government program that investigated unidentified aerial phenomenon.
For over 16 years, on behalf of the U.S. government, I worked as a senior intelligence official on the unidentified aerial phenomenon topic.
We learned that the U.S. government was involved in a long-running secret war with other nations to collect and reverse engineer vehicles not made by humans.
I have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human beings.
It's rotating. There's a whole fleet of them.
The first country that cracks the code on this technology will be the leader for years to come.
China has established its own version of a UAP task force.
You think for a second that they wouldn't consider using it to achieve their ends of domination?
This is similar to the Manhattan Project. This is the atomic weapon on steroids.
Right, let's bring in our panel now. And today we have Professor Avi Loeb, an astrophysicist at Harvard University. Nick Pope, who handled the UAP issue for the UK Ministry of Defence, where he investigated sightings to assess defence and national security implications. And finally, 17-year-old Danny Choupak, the world's youngest founder and CEO of a rocket company. Welcome to the programme, everyone. Before we get into the documentary, Professor Loeb, can I just ask you, what is your position, your personal position on aliens? Do you think it's more likely that they do exist or not?
It's very likely that we are not the most accomplished species in the Milky Way galaxy because the sun formed in the last 1/3 of cosmic history. Most stars, 100 billion of them, formed billions of years before the sun. We came late to the party, and we should check around. And, for that, we have science, we have telescopes, we have the intelligence agencies monitoring the sky. So let's just look at the facts and figure out who is in our neighborhood.
And in your long career, what is the most compelling evidence that pushes you in that direction?
Well, that about 10% of all stars have a planet the size of the Earth, roughly at the same separation. And we know that we started from a soup of chemicals on the surface of these planets, and the conditions are very similar in other houses on our cosmic street. Now, the mainstream of the scientific community is searching for microbes. And I'm just saying, let's hedge our bets, because if there is someone just like us, it might be easier for us to detect it. If there is an intelligent resident on our street, we might see a tennis ball that was thrown by that resident, or we might see the resident visiting our front door, or we might see a construction project next to their home. So let's just watch out and make it part of the mainstream of science.
Thank you for that, Nick Pope. I think you're of a similar thinking, is that right?
That's correct, yes. As Professor Loeb pointed out, it's likely that we're going to find out we're a pretty ordinary little planet orbiting a fairly ordinary sort of star. So unless we thought there was something almost literally magical in a sort of Harry Potter sense about Earth, which clearly there isn't, I think we'll find that the universe is teeming with life, not least because life seemed to arise very quickly here on Earth and likely has elsewhere in the cosmos.
So just a matter of time then, from your perspective, Nick. Danny, your business is sending satellites into space. What's out there, or are we alone?
Well, I believe it's more likely than not that aliens do exist, but I would be very surprised if there were civilizations out there more advanced than us. Humans have only had a technological revolution in the last few centuries, and for most of our history, we were very much tribal. We were hunter-gatherers, and our technological advancements have increased exponentially. So I think that if there was someone on a similar timescale in terms of technological development, then we would see them. And to date, we haven't seen any remnants of lost civilizations or Dyson spheres around stars.
Anybody on the panel want to come in on that point?
Well, it's not easy to see those signatures. We need to dedicate funds and research effort in order to find it, because the evidence is subtle. Unless, of course, there is a mega structure like a Dyson sphere that is easy to detect. But most of the time, look at our products. You know, we can't even see our own spacecraft at the distance, roughly the Earth-Sun separation, because they don't reflect enough sunlight. And just imagine that such spacecraft are going through the solar system. We don't know how much traffic there is. So I would argue that when Enrico Fermi asked, where is everybody? The most obvious answer is, we didn't develop the tools to detect them yet. And it's a matter of putting the effort, putting the priority on this subject within the mainstream. It's easy to say we don't see anything by throwing dust in the air and just, then you maintain your ignorance.
Okay. I think you're all cautiously veering towards maybe there's something out there, we should be open-minded. But this documentary goes much, much further. We have a number of people who used to work with the US government in one way or another saying that there is a government program to reverse engineer vehicles not made by humans. And a number of those participants said they even saw non-human beings. Nick Pope, if I can come to you, did this documentary change the way you view the subject?
Well, I think what it didn't do is obviously deliver a smoking gun. I mean, we still don't have definitive proof of an extraterrestrial presence. But what the documentary did do very effectively is show clearly that there are many people now in the government, the military, and the intelligence community who have had direct and indirect exposure to this subject and who are absolutely convinced as a result of this that there is some sort of presence here. And now what we need to do to push it over the line, of course, is we already have Congress engaged, but perhaps Congress can now look at this documentary, take some of those people and get them under oath and really find out who knows what.
Danny, one of the main participants in this documentary stood in front of a chalkboard and he explained the various criteria that go to make up an unidentified anomalous phenomena. I know that you have a problem with some of what he said.
I think that the documentary as a whole is quite contradictory of itself. It relies very heavily on the idea that the people speaking have access to confidential information and that their opinions kind of come from that exposure. But the points that they made with public information, were largely wrong. For example, the note on the fastest aircraft ever to fly, I think they mentioned the SR-72, and they quoted a figure around 4,000 miles an hour. We nearly doubled that in 2004. So it makes me doubt whether, if they did have access to confidential information, are they failing to interpret that as well?
Professor Loeb, did you find the documentary compelling or just a rehash of everything we already know?
Well, the government itself, the intelligence agencies, admit that there are objects in the sky they cannot identify. And that is a serious national security issue because they're admitting they can't do their job. So most likely these are objects from adversarial nations, and we need to find out what they are. But in the process of doing so, we can also maybe find something that came from outside of this Earth. And that is what the Galileo project that I'm leading doing. We are building observatories, and we had 3 of them. And, you know, the way to make progress is by looking for evidence, scientific quality evidence, not listening to stories being told by other people, because the foundation of science is the humility to learn, not the arrogance of expertise.
That's a fair point.
Not listening to government employees that tell us stories. You know, that doesn't carry much water.
No, I think that's a fair point. And to that end, the Pentagon has a specific office to look into UFOs. Well, it's called the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, also known as AARO, and it examines videos sent in by members of the public, like this one. Now, this was a bit of a mystery for a while, but AARO now says they're just birds. However, according to the AARO director, John KOSLOSKI, around 2% of these reports remain a mystery.
As an example of a couple of those cases that merit further analysis that are helping us refine our hypotheses, there are a few triangles that have been seen by local law enforcement.
These are glowing triangles in the sky.
In these cases, very, very black triangle, triangular prism. So it looks like a pie slice, hovering about the size of a Prius, about 40 to 60 meters away. So as the officer was driving up to investigate underneath a glowing orb, he slammed on his brakes, and this thing the size of a Prius, blacker than black, reared up 45 degrees and then shot up into the sky faster than anything he'd ever seen. And as it was leaving his sight, it shot out red and blue fireworks, flares, so bright it lit up the inside of his vehicle. He didn't see any propulsion, no wind, didn't hear anything over the sound of his own vehicle.
And you have more than one of these sightings?
We have a few others, one from local law enforcement.
So, Danny, what do you make of that? Assuming that they're not lying, what could they have seen?
First of all, I think that's a big assumption. And I don't think that a few cops saying that they saw triangles is any kind of evidence for anything. But not every propulsion system will necessarily have a visible exhaust. Drones, for example. Also, you mentioned that there were lights of some kind, nebulous lights. It's very little information to go off in terms of diagnosing the system in question.
Nick Pope, in terms of anomalous phenomena, having no obvious propulsion, no means of propulsion, no signature, is just one of the criteria. The others being transmedium, so that the vehicle can move through different mediums. So, for example, through space, into the air, and then into water. It's able to hover silently for long periods and is able to perform movements with extreme and sudden changes in speed and direction. What do you make of these reports that AARO is looking into, though?
Well, they're fascinating, and of course, they're not the only ones. We had waves of sightings of similar objects, but actually much larger, in the Hudson Valley in the United States in the 80s, in Belgium in 1990, in the United Kingdom in 1993. And the sorts of cases that AARO are looking for, I think, are very similar to the sorts of cases that interested us at the Ministry of Defense. For example, where you have pilots seeing things, but to Danny's point about eyewitness testimony, yes, of course, that's not enough. What we were really interested in, when those cases are corroborated by some sort of data, for example, from radar systems, forward-looking infrared cameras, military satellites, and where government experts in what we call MASINT, which is measurement and signature intelligence, can look at those data and say, this seems to go beyond the cutting edge of our own technology. And that's the sort of thing that interests us.
Professor Loeb, do reports like the one I've just mentioned cut any ice with you?
Well, you have to understand that the claim is that there is a lot of classified information. And of course, even if those objects are human-made, there is an interest on behalf of the intelligence agencies to keep those reports classified, because otherwise it would demonstrate their incompetence to adversarial nations. And therefore, they want to keep it under wraps so that they will not get scrutinized. However, if we are dealing with information or materials from 50 years ago, any such data is completely irrelevant for the present day technologies that we possess. And so I would argue that there should be some information that can be declassified and shared with scientists like myself. But after all, it's not about storytelling. It's about seeing the actual evidence as to whether we can assess whether it's human-made or something else.
Can we just take a moment to listen to Professor from Stanford now, Dr. Gary Nolan? He's a highly accomplished and respected figure in the field of medicine and biotechnology, and he believes something was probably on the Earth before us.
You know, I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but I mean, I did get a phone call from somebody representing the White House because I was talking about something that they felt was a little too on the edge. They said, "You need to just shut up, Gary." I conclude that there's definitely something here. But I think the more interesting conclusion is if something is here, it's likely been here longer than humans have even been civilized. So it really opens the question, and actually it's something that I think Charles Fort actually said, is, you know, Earth is probably somebody else's property.
Danny, that's a slightly different claim. He is well known, he is well respected in Stanford, but what do you make of those claims?
So I think, for example, Professor Loeb's mission and drive to find out what's really out there and monitor the universe very diligently in case we do stumble upon something that could be taken as proof is very noble and definitely worth pursuing. But I think the field is a bit of a clown show, and anyone taking blurry videos of a sphere bobbing up and down in the water as hard evidence for extraterrestrial life on Earth, I think that's a bit ridiculous.
Nick Pope, this is such an interesting idea, very attractive idea, which you see discussed endlessly on podcasts. But to Danny's point, you know, you don't feel very convinced by it.
Well, this is where, again, we need Congress to do more. We've already, of course, had congressional hearings and classified briefings, both in the Senate and the House. And that goes, of course, across the Armed Services Committees, the Intelligence Committees, and the Oversight Committees. And I think everyone's clear. Look, a lot of this is, of course, misidentification. Some of it will be our own black project technology, and some will likely belong to adversaries like Russia and China. But, you know, there's an old saying with this subject that we used to say at the Ministry of Defense, the skeptics have to be right every time. The believers only need to be right once. And this is why I'm very hopeful that the task force on the declassification of federal secrets, which has already looked at things like JFK, they are now going to be looking at the UAP issue. And I hope that they can draw together a lot of these stories and say, well, that's fine, but yeah, where is the beef? And we want the beef. We all want the beef.
Professor Loeb, we're coming towards the end of the programme. In the documentary, a number of the ex-officials said that they believe that the public are ready to hear the news about aliens and alien technology, alluding perhaps to the fact that that might have been one of the reasons why officials are holding back. Well, first of all, do you think that is one of the reasons? And do you think the public are ready to absorb that sort of information?
The public may not be ready, but that's irrelevant. Just think about all humans on Earth as part of our family, and we sit at dinner and we know, someone knows that we have neighbors. Why would you avoid this information from your family members? That makes no sense. It's one of those facts about reality that we don't want to keep secret, just like the fact that the Earth is not at the center of the universe, so you want the public to know that. And the fact that the church put Galileo in house arrest didn't prevent this truth from coming out. I mean, in 1992, they admitted that Galileo was right, but that was 350 years after he died. We don't want just to delay the process of learning. We want to know right now what information we have about this subject. So my hope is that if the government has information, it will share it. If not, scientists like myself will check out. Now, one thing to keep in mind, we may not be the first intelligent civilization on this Earth. We tend to think so, but just, the Earth's history is 4.6 billion years. We have documented history of our own over the past 6,000 years. That's tiny. That's a tiny bit, 1 part in a million or so of the Earth's history. So we should be modest in terms of assuming that we are the most intelligent species that ever existed in our neighborhood, because maybe there was something before us. We haven't found, computer terminals in archaeological digs, but who knows who was here, and if they left something behind, that may be some of these unidentified objects that our technologies have difficulty identifying.
And Professor Loeb, just finally, earlier in the year, you suggested to a number of big outlets that the 3i Atlas might be a relic of some sort of alien civilization. Just wondering if you could give us an update on that.
Right, so it will get this object, interstellar object, will get closest to Earth just a week before the holidays, and let's hope it will not deliver any unwanted gifts for the holidays. It is surprising in some of its characteristics. For example, its trajectory is aligned with the plane of the planets around the sun to within 5 degrees. That's a chance of 1 in 500. It's very massive, about 1 million times more massive than the first interstellar object that was discovered in 2017. It has a glow that is extended in the direction of the sun, opposite to the direction we often see cometary tails that are pushed away from the sun. It has mostly nickel, very little iron, and the only place in nature where we find that is in industrially produced nickel alloys. But overall, it's most likely a natural object, just has a lot of unusual features that, in my mind, it argues that we must monitor it because it could be a black swan event. We might assign a low probability for it to be technological, but because of the huge implications to society, we must collect as much data as possible. And at the end of the day, if it turns out to be a rock, we still learn something new about our cosmic environment.
Okay, let me bring in Danny for a final word on that. I know you're a bit more skeptical about that, Danny. Come in.
Well, you mentioned that the chance of, for example, its orbital trajectory aligning in the way it does, being 1 in 500, as well as a number of other strange phenomena. But I suppose if you look at enough space rocks, one of them is going to be weird. So what is it that pushes you over the edge, as opposed to it's a very strange coincidence and it's maybe scientifically interesting? What makes you think that there is it serves as a good basis of evidence for alien life, where that's a probability we can't really quantify?
This is an excellent question, and the reason I mentioned the 1 in 500 is that we have only a sample of 3 objects from interstellar space. So if we had hundreds, you would expect such an event to be quite likely. All I'm saying is there are anomalies. I'm not saying it's any proof for a technological origin, but it just educates us as to what these objects coming from outside the solar system might be. So if we learn that it's a rock, we will be better equipped to address future objects. And the Rubin Observatory in Chile will find one every few months now. It's a new frontier in astrophysics. And let's stay curious and check whether among the rocks we might have a technological spacecraft. Because, as much as I admire your entrepreneurship, I do think that there must be more accomplished space entrepreneurs in the Milky Way galaxy for billions of years.
Professor Avi Loeb, Nick Pope and Danny Choupak, thank you all very much for your analysis today. Really appreciate that. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. We'll leave you now with the views of the great British public. Do they believe in aliens?
I'd like to think there is something else in the universe apart from just us, really, that are doing a better job, quite frankly, than what we are.
No, everyone's entitled to their own views, and who am I to discredit them?
I do believe in aliens. I think they exist. I think there's like extraterrestrial beings that's aside from us. I just don't think like in the universe we're like the only people. So yeah.
Where's the evidence? Where's the facts? Don't believe it.
I believe that there's definitely something greater out there. We can't be the only living organisms in the universe. So sure, in a way, yes.
Do I believe that intelligent beings live on other planets? Yes. Do I believe they visited Earth? No, they probably haven't.
Definitely, who are we to say that there's nothing else out there in the world? And yeah, I definitely think there could be aliens outside.
I believe there's something out there, yeah, definitely. I don't know what.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's weirder if you don't.
I mean, we're like a small planet, and there are so many other planets. Also, it'd be really cool. So maybe there are aliens here right now. I don't know. But maybe you're an alien.